This is Whitley Strieber, and this is Dreamland. You have reached the edge of the world, and this week on Dreamland, Linda Moulton Howe is back with us again to talk about an incredible UFO incident in Kitchener, Ontario, and how it relates to an equally extraordinary incident in 2008 in Stephensville, Texas. The Stephensville incident resulted in jets from nearby Carswell Air Force Base chasing a UFO, which was reported by local people, was denied by the Air Force, but then later MUFON, in an FOIA request, got radar tracks from the Federal Aviation Agency that proved without question that exactly what those honest people in that town said they saw was true. They saw Air Force jets tracking and chasing a UFO. It happened. That's the beginning of this report. But then Linda and I began to riff. We began to talk about a lot of things that we know, and suddenly she opened up about something so incredible that I'm still kind of reeling, thinking about it, about the relationship between these events and an ancient language, and a man who was studying this for the government for 33 years, who told her some secrets about who we really are and who they really are that you're going to hear today. It's really remarkable stuff. The two of us, Linda and I, now have been working together for many, many years, and there's a level of trust that's built up between us, and you're getting the benefit of it today. This is possibly it's the most extraordinary Dreamland I've ever done. Certainly the most extraordinary one in many a year. So I'm very proud to present it. And now in the next breath, those of you who aren't subscribers, which is pushing 98% of everyone who is listening to this right now, it's time and past time. We need you, and you need us. But there's also a lighter side to everything, and I've got a couple of neat books out. I think they're very neat. One is an e-book. It's for Kindle. It is on the Amazon Kindle store. It's called Christmas Spirits by Whitley Strieber. It is an update of A Christmas Carol using my own take on it, set in modern times, and the ghosts of Christmas are no longer spirits, they are visitors. And I've woven in some of my own understanding and my own experiences to make this a real and very, I think, beautiful Christmas story. A lot of fun to read. So it's only $7.99 as well for your Kindle. If you'd like to take a look at a video about it, go to my YouTube channel. Let's simply search Whitley Strieber on YouTube.com, and you can look at that video, and you can also look at a video about our new teen thriller, Melody Burning. Believe me, this story is gonna give your teenager some real thrills, and frankly, I think you'll enjoy reading it just as much as I enjoyed writing it, based on a perfectly wonderful idea by my resident creative genius, Anne Strieber. So take a look at both of them. Why not? And on January the 5th, Solving the Communion Enigma, the next step in our incredible journey toward a higher level of human experience that will unfold just as these times become darker and darker. There will be a light shining in the middle of all of this darkness. It will not be the great passive, indifferent mass of people all around you. It will be you, those who are not passive, those who stand up, who care, and who understand the true potential of the human being. So come with me and Linda right now on a journey that you will never forget, that certainly neither of us will ever forget. In 2008, there were some remarkable events in and around Stephensville, Texas, which Linda Moulton Howe reported on both on earthfiles.com and on Dreamland. And subscribers can listen to her report on Dreamland by simply searching for it in the subscriber section. This event was eventually investigated by MUFON, and using a Freedom of Information Act request, they obtained radar tracks showing that U.S. Air Force fighters had indeed tracked UFOs in the area of Stephensville, just as local residents reported. Now it's 2011, and lo and behold, something strikingly similar is happening in Ontario, and Linda has a remarkable report for us today covering what exactly is going on there. Of course, Linda's website is earthfiles.com, and now here she is reporting to us on an extraordinary UFO event in Canada. Emmy Award-winning reporter Linda Moulton Howe.
Thank you, Whitley. It was back in January of 2008 that I traveled to Stephenville, Texas, to investigate multiple eyewitness reports of silent, brightly glowing aerial objects that projected colorful patterns in the night sky, and many eyewitnesses said they were looking at objects that were spinning and projecting all of these colors. One of those discs began projecting three-dimensional, multicolored patterns at 10:10 p.m. in the evening of Saturday, January 19th, 2008. The photographer was a resident there named David Carone. He was standing on his home porch near the Stephenville Clark Field Municipal Airport on the east side of town. David braced his arm and camera against a wooden post on his porch. The total videotape runs nearly 12 minutes. Occasionally, David's voice can be heard, so audio was functioning. But David said that he could not hear any sound from the disc, and you do not hear any sound on the video. And it suddenly began projecting these colorful patterns that pulsed 2 every second, changing every 15 video frames, and I have counted that myself on the video. You can see 9 minutes of David Carone's original videotape at my news website, www.earthfiles.com. I have a hot link to that video and to dozens of other similar aerial images that I have received since January 2008 from Oswego, Illinois, Kokomo, Indiana, Reno, Nevada, Empire, Ohio, Elmwood and Plum City, Wisconsin, Beaver Creek, Oregon, Freiburg, Maine, and now Kitchener, Ontario, Canada. On November 24th, 2011, I received an email from a Kitchener resident named Greg Crane, and he wrote, "Please help me. I listen to you on Coast to Coast AM, Dreamland, and look at your earthfiles.com reports. It sounds like I'm seeing the same thing that you have talked and reported about. I have many pictures of this, about 800 of them taken with a Kodak digital camera mounted to a telescope on a tripod. The camera does not move. There are 3 UFOs or whatever they are. They are not out every night, but a few days a week. I do know these are not twinkling stars. I have tried different shutter speeds with my camera on a tripod, and the colorful object moves a lot. This picture," and he had a number with it, and I have it at earthfiles.com so you can see all of this. This picture was a long exposure, and we now have done analysis, and he was not sure in his Kodak EasyShare, but we now know it was a 30-second exposure. This is also the second UFO that has come in from the south. It is out later than the first that comes from the west. The second stays longer than the first one, but it seems to be farther away. I have pictures of both of these UFOs, and there is a third UFO I can only see from the road, not from my house. I can send you as many pictures as you want. I also have pictures of the light with clouds behind it showing that it's not in outer space. I have been watching these strange lights for about a year and a half. Please let me know what you think. Well, now I have spent hours on the phone talking with Greg Crane, and a professional photographer who has also taken interest and is working with Greg. Greg Crane has lived most of his 44 years in Kitchener, Ontario, Canada. He also loved working on machines since dropping out of high school to restore an old car. And today he is now a professional restorer of antique cars and works out of the same home and office that he's had for 18 years. So Greg is very familiar with the landscape and sky around his place that was built on the side of a hill. The hilltop rises to the east, blocking out that part of the sky. But Greg has clear views of the west, the south, and the north. Beginning in the summer of 2009, Greg Crane and some of his friends noticed near sunset in a still blue sky that a very bright silver, they didn't know if it was a star, was changing colors. After that, Greg realized he could see these other two from the house or from the road, and he began finally in July of 2011, for the very first time at the end of that month, getting a camera, getting the telescope, getting a tripod, and determined that he would take photographs of whatever this object was. He's now up to more than 800, has been working with a professional photographer, and he has also seen and photographed red, blue, and green smaller objects that form a triangular pattern around each of these bright silver objects. And when he asked the professional photographer if this could be a digital anomaly in the frame, we're in a digital age, could these red, green, and blue, which you can clearly see in many of the photographs at earthfiles.com, could they be some kind of chroma anomaly? The professional photographer analyzing the images, taking his own images, says absolutely not. These are some kind of smaller objects in the sky forming triangular patterns around the much larger silver object that projects all of these three-dimensional, multicolored patterns exactly as the David Carone video back in January of 2008 in Stephensville, Texas. Here now is Greg Crane from Kitchener, Ontario, Canada.
First noticed it, there was a bunch of us standing in a parking lot at Tim Hortons, which is a coffee shop, having a coffee one night, and somebody had pointed out this twinkling star in the sky that changes all different colors. The more I was outside at the times that the sun was going down, the more I noticed it. It was not something I planned on telling anybody. You know, some areas of the country that stuff's accepted, some areas it's laughed at. Around here it's really laughed at, so I was not about to really tell anybody.
And Greg, when did you get the telescope attached to the camera and start taking photos?
That would have been this past summer.
The summer of 2011, in what month?
It would be towards the end, in July.
And that's when you started photographing for the first time, because finally you had a telescope and a camera that you could aim at this colorful, pulsing object.
Yes. I started noticing its flight path. It came out pretty consistent times, took the same flight path, and disappeared approximately at the same time.
Describe the flight path from where to where.
It would show up before it got dark, about the height of the cell tower, would come across the sky, and it would make a right-hand turn and then disappear to the horizon, going away from me.
What direction is it coming from and going to?
It's coming from the setting sun.
So it's coming from the west.
Yes. The sun has gone down, but it's still light. It goes across the setting sun, stops, and then takes a right-hand turn and proceeds to go away. The other one, which is about 33 degrees from it, it comes out and it would stay stationary. It would appear and then it would go away. It would disappear, like it was just going farther away.
Did it pop in and out or fade in and out?
It would just get smaller until it disappeared. Now, there's also a third one that makes a complete triangle. The third one, though, unless I drive somewhere, I can't see it because I have buildings and trees and stuff that block the view of it.
Do you mean that you have seen the bright silver lights form a triangular pattern in addition to the small red, blue, and green objects that form triangular patterns?
Yes. But the third one, I don't have any pictures of because the only time I can see it is if I'm driving. I live on a bit of a hill, not quite to the top of the hill. So I have to be on the other side of the hill to see the third one. Many times on my way home I've seen it. There's times that I've seen the one that's by the cell tower and not the other one. There's times I've seen the other one and not the one by the cell tower. Majority of the time, they're out at the same time, but not always. The one I've seen the most often, the month of November, is the one that's over the highway.
And you think that's to your south?
Yeah.
And the other object comes in from the west, and the third object is behind the hill. Is there any difference in the behavior with the colors between the one that comes in from the west and the one that is to your south?
No, if I take pictures of them, they're exactly the same. They have the dots, they have the same erratic movements, the same shapes. Once I take the pictures, I can't even really tell which pictures are from which one.
And the erratic movement, your camera and telescope are locked off on a tripod, is that correct?
Yes.
So when you do a time lapse, for example, the two longest exposures, and one looks like a bunch of yarn, there is so much movement in that frame. Your camera was locked off, and whatever that object was doing was making all of those colorful lines in that shutter speed.
Yes. Now, if you blow that picture up to the original 100%, you'll see stars and stuff in the background. And if it was the camera moving or the telescope moving, anything in the background would have the same erratic movement. And the stuff in the background doesn't have that.
What did you see with your naked eye when you were taking those two long exposure photos?
What shows up on the screen of the camera is just the flashing dot moving around. Every time I'll take a couple of pictures, and then I got to stop and then readjust the telescope because it goes out of view of the telescope.
It's moving that much?
Yes. Like I would say about every 3 or 4 pictures. The reason I took one group of pictures, one right after another, was I wanted to see if I could capture a kind of consistent movement. I took those pictures one right after another, and by then it was off the telescope. I had to stop and then readjust the telescope again. To the naked eye through the telescope, those dots are flashing on and off hundreds of times a second. So I think that's why the camera caught them still. Like when I took the picture, I moved the camera. The light that's in the sky, the UFO, it's on all the time. So that light got distorted when the camera wiggled, but the red and the green and blue dots, they're flashing on and off. So I think that's how come they came through the camera not distorted, and then the one in the sky came through distorted. Because if you play the videos and you shut the video on and off, you'll see the dots flashing, like moving in and out of the object.
What was the very first thing that you saw when you looked through the telescope and the camera?
A round object, star-like, changing multiple colors. And it was hard to keep it centered of the telescope because it was moving. In the daytime, it looks like a silver star, long before any other stars. It's silver-looking, and it's much bigger, and this is out an hour before any of the other stars.
Were you seeing lights projected at any time away from the round object?
Not the first pictures. Later on, the more time I spent watching it and taking pictures, then I would see lights coming in and out of it, especially the red dot, because the red shows up against the sky better.
What is your own intuitive sense of what the red, green, and blue dots are?
I personally think once I had noticed them in the film, I started to focus with the telescope more around the object, and hundreds of times a second you could see these little flashes of light, which were the little dots. My personal feeling is I think they're either gathering some kind of information, like how we send a probe to Mars. Those are the probes that are going out, maybe taking samples of the atmosphere, maybe taking pictures. I think they're doing whatever work that object is doing. The last time I was taking pictures of it, I had the telescope set up outside and hooking the camera to the telescope, and I was doing all that in the daylight. It's easier to do it during the day than it is at night. And I noticed it came out. And this was at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And my neighbor came over, and he was talking to me. What are you doing? And I said, oh, just taking pictures of stars. He looked over at it. He goes, what the hell is that? And I said, oh, it's a star. He said, that's no star. It's broad daylight. That was the last set of pictures I took, which would be November 25th was the last time I took pictures. The one photo I sent you, if you blow it up, it does resemble your stereotypical UFO.
This shows like a horseshoe.
After the horseshoe, it comes back down. You see it has a red and yellow flash of light, and then it starts going off on its own. At the end of the trail, to me, looks like your typical UFO, saucer-shaped with a dome on top. The other thing, it's below high cloud. The low rainy cloud, it's above it, but it's below the high cloud.
So you would estimate how high this silver object is?
What high cloud is in the atmosphere, I would say about what the height of it is. It's not out in space.
You are seeing a light that appears to be flashing colors. You're not seeing what we see in the photos that look like the traces of symbols.
No, that doesn't. That only shows up on film. It does not look like that when I'm looking. It's just a dot that's flashing all different colors and moving around. But on film, it has the symbols, like the trail behind it.
Have you had any intuitive sense about what it is?
I personally think that it's something that is anti-gravity propulsion. Now, from my understanding of gravity, very similar to electricity. Electricity has pulses and waves. Gravity, let's say, has pulses and waves, and I could be wrong. If you had a craft that worked off the gravity field of the Earth, repelling and attracting, and that's, let's say, how it flew, you are sitting in that craft, you would not be bouncing around because you're in your own gravitational field, just like when planet Earth is going through space, we don't feel the hiccups and speed bumps of space because we're in our own atmosphere, our own gravitational pull. If this is the same thing, and for it to stay somewhat stationary, like to hover, it basically is riding the gravitational waves of the Earth. And when it goes to accelerate or take off, it either attracts or repels the gravity of Earth.
Do you think these are non-human technologies?
My gut feeling is I do think they're alien.
Why?
Well, especially with the erratic movements, if there's something human inside it, I don't think any human would survive that kind of erratic movements.
They could be unmanned drones.
That's a possibility. But I do think that we are being observed and visited. If you take a look at any ancient cultures and ancient history, it seems like there was an alien interference. And my opinion is, whichever happened thousands of years ago, it's like, okay, you guys can look after yourself, but we're coming back. And we want to see what mess you made. And I pretty much think that we made a pretty good mess. So they're watching, making a plan, getting ready to come back. And what happens when they come back? No idea.
And what do you suppose these projected three-dimensional multicolored symbols are doing? What is the purpose?
Trying to communicate.
With whom?
With us, or maybe even with each other. Maybe they're not trying to communicate with us. Maybe they're trying to communicate to something that's, sitting on Mars looking down at us. If they have the technology for interstellar travel, if they have the technology to do pretty much anything that we would like to do, can't, then you'd think that they would have the technology to be able to translate English or any language and communicate somehow. How can you not want to know, not that you can do anything about it. I mean, if I found out tomorrow that, it's either man-made or alien, it's not like I can do anything about it. How can you not want to know?
Exactly.
Like, how could you just walk away and go, yeah, we're being watched by aliens. Well, look at that, they're shooting at each other. Oh, look at that. Oh, well, geez, they're coming. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
How can you ignore it?
And Whitley, I thought until recently that the January 2008 Stephensville multiple-colored aerial objects that projected 3D patterns and symbols there were the first in history. But on December 12th, I received an email following up the Earth Files reports I have been doing about Kitchener from Australian scientist Horace Drew. And he sent me a cover of a 1982 book by Quentin Fogarty. It was published in England. And right in the top of the book that is entitled, Let's Hope They're Friendly, the remarkable story behind the world's first verified film encounter with an unidentified flying object. And that is a reference to the 1978 Christchurch, New Zealand crew out of ABC in Sydney. And they were up in the air, and they were working on a documentary, not about UFOs, when this huge bright light showed up outside of the window, and they ran videotape on it as a TV crew, and it made all of the networks around the world back in 1978. And I had forgotten that one of the other objects that were on the videotape from 1978, this was magnetic film videotape running at 30 frames a second, is a bright banana yellow. It looks like a symbol, a 3D colored symbol in the sky. And I was grateful to receive this from Dr. Horace Drew, because we lose track. We forget what has been seen in the skies of this planet, videotaped and photographed over this case 78 years ago is nearly 35 years ago. And here we are today with multiple colored three-dimensional patterns that look like the 1978, look like the 2008 over Stephensville, Texas, and now here is the repetition of something in the sky coming in multiples so consistently for at least 3 to 4 years that now this antique car restorer, who knows literally nothing about UFOs, or did not until this started showing up, and then he started talking to people. Now he's got a professional photographer who has gotten an extraordinary photo that I will have in part 3 at Earth Files, and you will hear his comments and see from a man who has a $12,000 camera, lens, and tripod, who says that the photograph that he took independently from Greg Crane absolutely baffles him.
And the whole thing baffles me. And Greg Crane's very intelligent question, why do we ignore it?
Yes.
I mean, here we are, Linda. You and I both know, and Linda's going to be reporting on this in more detail very soon, that there has been a change in our climate situation, specifically that there is methane outgassing from the floor of the Arctic Ocean, the original endgame scenario in terms of global warming. And I'm sure half of my listeners are going to say, oh, global warming doesn't exist, because you've been duped and have chosen wrongly, because now that this is happening, this thing is terribly dangerous.
And Whitley, that amount, the volume that was just reported in early December in San Francisco at the International Geophysical Conference there by a Russian scientist who works in Fairbanks for ICAR, it is so astounding, the volume and the multiple volumes of methane, that everybody that I have talked to so far, and I'm waiting to do an interview with somebody who speaks English, that it is of a volume that has shocked every scientist who was present at the IGU.
And you won't hear a thing about it on the American media. You have to dig into British media to find anything about it at the moment. Maybe they'll pick up on it at some point. But my point is this. We are reaching a time of great change when mankind is going to be challenged as never before. And I think somebody else has known this for a long time. And I think that manifestations like this represent knowledge being thrown at us willy-nilly and we are simply unwilling to look. What in the world is the matter with the scientific community? Are they under some kind of esoteric spell? What prevents them from going out and picking up the knowledge that has literally been dropped into our laps for 40, 50 years or longer by the UFO phenomenon, the close encounter phenomenon? If they just would go and examine people who have implants, they would certainly learn something useful that might even eventually help us get into contact with whatever is here and learn from it whatever it has to teach us. What have we got to lose? Right now, it seems like we're going to lose everything.
Our biggest loss is that we are living in a government and on a planet that has chosen policies of denial for 60 years about what they do know. That non-human, interplanetary, celestial, these are their words from our own FDR, Truman, Eisenhower government documents that have been leaked. They've known this since World War II. And the fact that we are living in a country that now is drowning in lies from the superficial to the profound, and that why this country is so sick relates, I personally think, right back to trying to force an Alice in Wonderland blinders on an entire nation, on an entire world, that which exists, other life in the universe, intelligent life that interacts with planet Earth, is not here, is not real, while they have been back engineering technology from that phenomena for their own power and their own greed. And I don't know what it's going to take, Whitley, to stop it. But Greg in Ontario is one of the few humans who persisted, was stubborn enough to say, I want to know what this is.
You know, I have to ask myself a question. I have been listening to the reports of the Arab Spring and watching the demonstrations all over the world, looking at the cover of Time magazine with the protester as the man of the year, and I'm an American. I'm not a protester by nature. But I have to tell you, Linda, we have been so ill-used on so many, many different levels that I'm wondering if it isn't going to take the American people walking into places like the CIA and just blowing open the damn safes. What else can we do? And I'll tell you this right now. They bitch and moan about the Syrians they're killing their people because they'll do it too. Believe me, they'll do it too. If the American people walk into the wrong door, the machine guns will start.
Yes, you're talking about a second civil war in the United States of America. And I think it is very intriguing that many people in the human abduction syndrome have always described being on some kind of a craft, being shown three-dimensional holographic scenes or images, and one of them has to do with some kind of civil war in the United States.
Well, you know, I've seen that. And, I don't know if you have. You had one vision long ago that I always thought, it stayed with me from the day you told me back in 1990. Oh, goodness, it must have been earlier than that, in the late 80s. At my cabin in upstate New York, you told me about a vision of buildings in New York and glass falling.
Yeah, and that was...
It happened.
Well, and... It's interesting you bring this up because when your book, Communion, came out, wasn't it in January of 1986?
Yes.
Okay. And it was August of 1985, and I was working on a project having to do with a chemistry series for PBS, and I was based in Washington and working with crews on the East Coast.
Linda, just for the record, it was January of 1987 that my book came out.
Okay, then it was August of 1986 that I went up to Accord, because I remember it was the August before Communion was released.
Right, that's right.
And I got that call from an abductee who is a mutual friend of ours who has never allowed his name to be out in the public. And he said that you were interested in talking with me about animal mutilations and that he was willing to get me up to a court. And what happened was that I was working in New York. Well, it was Washington, and was in New York and Washington and down the East Coast, and I had been working at the UN also in New York when one day in what would have been then the summer of '86, I was walking on the street going up to UNICEF. And so I'm not very far from the river or from UNICEF when all of a sudden something made me look straight up. It was one of those intuitive gut moments. And to my eyes, it looked like glass was coming straight down on the street, and I literally ran off the sidewalk into the doorway of the building, waiting for the glass to fall. That's how real it was. And then when I didn't see the glass hit, and I walked back out, and I looked up, and the building is there, I thought, oh, my God, someday glass is going to explode here in New York. And it took until 9/11.
How did you feel on 9/11?
Oh, that was the most traumatic day for me at so many levels. I remember so clearly that I was getting dressed to go into Philly for a meeting. And I remember that I was pulling over a top and had my right arm in a sleeve the way you do on some things that fit tight over your neck. And then I remember now, as if it were just 1 second ago, that I had CNN. I always have CNN on, so I get news. And there was that voice that came in saying, there is a report that a small plane has crashed into one of the World Trade Towers. And that was the very first report on CNN. It wasn't about any kind of an airliner. It was about a small airplane.
Yeah, I remember the same report, yes.
And I froze. My arm is up in the sleeve. My ear and my brain is hearing this voice. This is the very first sentence that I'm hearing on September 11th, that somewhere it was that 8:13 or 8:10 or whenever that began, the story began. And I literally froze and walked over to the TV. I still have my arm up in the sleeve, and this voice feeling in my head was, oh my God, this is what it is about. This is the beginning. And at that moment, how did my soul, my intuition even have a clue? But I did. It was as if all of that, the glass shattering back in 1986 in the summer in New York near UNICEF, and then another conversation that I had with a government agent who retired and sought me out and talked with me in December of 1999. This would be 2 years before. He told me in this incredible download from his own firsthand knowledge about non-humans interacting with this planet, he said for more than 250 million years that our government was satisfied that that was true. He said, you need to know that within the next 5 years, this is December of 1999, within the next 5 years, an event is going to happen in the Middle East that will change the world forever. And when I said, well, can you fill in the details? He said, no, I cannot. I'm just warning you. And that collapsed in my head along with the shattered glass vision that I'd had back in the summer then of 86.
Yes.
So that all of it came crashing, which would be why I was literally in a mild state of shock, immobile, standing, watching and listening to CNN. And I remember I sat down at the edge of the bed staring at CNN. I never went to the meeting in downtown Philly. I, like so many others, my entire day stopped on a dime watching CNN.
Yeah, mine too. Linda, let's change the subject now and return to Kitchener, Ontario, and also, though, to Stephensville. And I want to ask you your sense of what these things are, because these objects obviously are extremely beautiful and very strange. Do you have any sense, and looking into your own intuitive abilities, which are, as the reason I brought this up, by the way, the whole thing about 911 folks, to let you know that Linda's more than a reporter. I mean, there's something very extraordinary going on here at a lot of different levels. But what is your intuitive sense about what this might be about?
Well, I'll tell you that when I went to Stephensville, and one of the people that I was to meet was the businessman, Mr. Allen. And he is the guy who had been up on top of one of the hills near Stephensville and saw how to describe it. He saw lights, he saw colors, he saw what he drew for me, and it's in one of my Earth Files reports. It looked like white flame coming out of one of these series of craft that were in a line that changed into a rectangle, that changed into all these patterns, and then he saw what looked to him like white fire, and he thought himself immediately of something in the Bible. He thought to himself, my God, it's the end of time, this is the apocalypse. All of this happened to him back in January of 2008, and then while he's seeing all of this drama playing out in the sky, two jets come, afterburners they're moving at such a rate, and they are charged up so much that he can see the afterburners coming out of these jets. They come right to where he had seen all of this aerial display in the sky on one of the hills not far from Stephensville. And the jets circle, and he said, whatever this thing was, it had, as you and I and so many people have heard thousands of times, the whole thing popped out like it didn't exist, and the jets are there, and then it popped back in, going at an accelerated rate, as if playing with the jets, and that whatever these objects were, he said, Linda, this was not acceleration as we know a jet that goes, or a car that goes from 0 to 60. The jets are trying to turn on a dime, and they can't. And the objects, when they flash back on, they didn't just accelerate. He said they popped from being in front of us. There were two other people watching with him on the hill, but they never would talk to me or to anyone. And he said it looked as if the multiple colored objects out in front of him stepped from in front of the hill to the horizon, miles away, in a fraction of a second, leaving the jets in their wake. And we've heard that kind of description. Well, he and I got together, and he's the one who handed me that CD that he paid money to David Carone to have a copy of the CD. And when I came to his meeting, and he had told David Carone, Linda Moulton Howe, the reporter for Earth Files and Dreamland and Premier Radio Networks Coast to Coast, is going to come here, and I want her to see this video that you have, because they knew each other. And David Carone took some money from Mr. Allen and gave him the CD, and he copied it and hand-delivered in his office to me and said, I want you to sit down and look at this. And that's where I first saw the video. And what struck me within the first minute of watching the blue disc that is slightly out of focus begin projecting crystal clear patterns that are three-dimensional. They are multiple. It is as if you strung together something out of colored beads and tubes and then put it up in the sky. I turned to him and said, you know, Mr. Allen, these look like symbols. They look like symbols I've seen before. And that set me off on a search. And the interesting thing to me is that some of the closest symbols that I've been able to match to what was projecting in the Stephensville area in January of 2008 is the ancient Hebrew Samaritan, the letters, the Hebrew letters in the old Samaritan language. Now, when you read about Samaritan, you are up in northern Mesopotamia region. And it turns out that whatever happened between Sumer and the whole Mesopotamian region 4,000 to 5,000 years ago, that there were, I'm going to say, wars and conflicts even then among who? That's the issue.
Yes, that is one of the primary points in history where we may have been interacted with. Go ahead.
Yes, and those old ancient conflicts in Mesopotamia may have been extraterrestrial group versus extraterrestrial group. Now, I'll give you an insight about that from the man who talked with me in December of 1999 before 9/11. It was a gigantic, long, profound discussion. And it included his describing his work for 33 years for the United States intelligence world. And this is how he described his own professional assignment: to monitor and research the geopolitical, territorial conflict of three extraterrestrial biological entity groups on this planet. That's how he described it, quote unquote.
My God.
Yes. And he is the one who said, Linda, we are convinced that we are dealing with at least three major extraterrestrial groups who have been interacting with and manipulating DNA on this planet for more than 250 million years, and he tied that statement to this explanation. He said, we have hard evidence that extraterrestrials manipulated DNA to create the dinosaurs. And I remember saying to him, oh my God, that's 65, 70,
it's 150 million years ago when they were created.
No, it's 200. 265 or 70 million years ago, or some people will say 241 million years. Either way, you are talking about before the dinosaurs, and then we had a long discussion that if there was genetic manipulation on this planet to create this gigantic dinosaur epic on the Earth, and then an asteroid comes from outer space, allegedly, into the Chicxulub crater down in the Gulf near the Yucatan and wipes out everything, and if the non-humans had the ability to start the dinosaurs, did they allow this to happen, or were they responsible for it because they wanted to end their dinosaur experiment? You know what that man said to me when I asked that question? He said, that's one of the questions I've been trying to answer.
Well, you know, when I wrote The Secret School, my book, The Secret School, I remembered things that I've never been able to prove. I can prove that there were certainly a lot of strange stuff going on back there in my childhood, because I've talked to other people, as I point out in the book, who remember similar experiences. So it wasn't nothing. It's not simply a work of the imagination. But one of the things in it was that there is a huge scale process of destroying and rebuilding on planet Earth evolutionarily, and one of the things that happens is that there is a long period of decline that is punctuated by something like what happened at the end of the dinosaur era, or what happened 150 million years prior to that at the end of the Permian era, where there is a huge sudden upheaval, as if somebody has been fooling with something on a blackboard and finally decided, well, let's just clear the whole blackboard off, and they erase everything. Right. But then what starts again, anew, is not what you would think. Right. It's not, it doesn't begin from scratch. Right. It starts a step or more than a step ahead. Right. Of where it ended. That's manipulation. That's not nature that does that.
That's right.
That's design.
That's right. And then, obviously, all of this is raising the big issue, is this planet, and perhaps Kepler 22b, the new one that has been found that is, 600 million light years from here, but it is apparently very similar, may have a watery surface, everything. Are the watery planets that would be conducive to life if they're orbiting around, say, yellow G spectrum stars, are they used by what Michio Kaku would call civilizations Roman numeral 2, 3, and maybe even 4 in this universe, and 4 would be where there would be advanced intelligences that could actually manipulate sun and solar engines for themselves beyond our comprehension, and that if there are these advanced civilizations that could find the planets that are perfect laboratories, perfect petri dishes for experimenting with various kinds of genetic material, then this planet may have been used just like a laboratory for eons beyond our imagining.
Linda, that is quite a place to end this extraordinary conversation. All I can say in response is this. I once had, and this is one of those fragmented memories that I can't really put into a context, and I don't talk much about them except when something comes up that's germane, because I can't. But I do remember once in an exchange of some sort with a visitor, when I attempted to convey my interest in how old they were and what they had seen, I got the impression that he had no idea how to tell me what he truly was. And it was an absolutely awesome, humbling experience. It happened out in the woods behind my house in the night sometime. When I was out walking, I never saw him. I knew he was there. I was meditating. I opened my eyes, and the place was just as empty as it had been. There was no one around. There was no sound. But I'm telling you now, that presence was alive. It was not my imagination. It was there, and I was aware of the fact that I was before an immense, intelligent, fearsomely alive presence that was beyond anything I could ever hope to describe.
And maybe as old as our entire solar system.
Maybe as old as the universe. Who knows? What was here before the universe? Was it them, and were they lonely or bored, perhaps? Is the universe a great experiment, or is it a game? Are we essential or trivial? Are we the future, or are we simply somebody's entertainment?
I wish we knew.
I wish we knew too, because whatever happens to us matters to us. Entertainment or not, whatever we are, we matter to ourselves. And that's where I came out after those nights in the woods. I don't care in the end about anything except us. And when I hold my grandson in my arms and I look to the future in my mind and in my heart, I used to look to it with such hope and such joy. Now, when I look to it, I see a darkness waiting there for him, and I see the cause of it. And I feel such anger toward those who have lied and those who have believed the lies, and the strange death wish that propels us all toward a dreadful destiny.
And that's why I feel that we must ally ourselves with the divine field. I think there is a divine field.
I do too.
I don't pretend to completely understand the relationship between the divine field and the matter worlds, but I know that that divine field is there. It has been in my life from beginning to now, and it is an ally to living life. And there is something, Whitley, I am convinced, that is an enemy of living life.
I do too. I think so too. You know, I used to spend a lot of time having a conversation about that with Shirley MacLaine. Ann and Shirley and I used to sit out on the deck at a restaurant up on the Pacific Coast Highway and talk about that dark force and how it seems to resent the presence of the light that has come into it. And that light, of course, is very much what we are part of.
But the divine field may be something completely and totally separate, the alpha to the omega, no entropy, no destruction, no war, and that somehow the matter worlds are playing some kind of a relationship to the divine field that we don't fully understand. We intuit every once in a while that the divine field is there and it is our ally, and while we are in these matter worlds with souls and spirits, for some reason we are called upon to discern something positive from something negative, and you've got to be clear on which side that you are on.
You have to be, and
yes.
You cannot be passive. To be passive is to be captured by the dark side, and that's what happens to the great majority of people. Not you, listeners. You wouldn't be here if you were passive. Believe me, it takes work to find this.
That's right.
That's right. And so, on that note, I'm gonna say, the dark side has its role and its place in the world, but not here.
That's right.
This place is about the light.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Dreamland. Be sure to tune in again next week. Dreamland is brought to you by UnknownCountry.com and our family of subscribers. Our news editor is Ann Strieber. Our science reporter is Linda Moulton Howe. Our webmaster is Daniel Stiegel. And I'm your Dreamland announcer, Brian Arnold. Thanks for listening. We'll be back next week.
Believe me, this story is gonna give your teenagers some real thrills, and frankly, I think you'll enjoy reading it just as much as I enjoyed writing it, based on a perfectly wonderful idea by my resident creative genius, Ann Strieber. So take a look at both of them. Why not? And on January the 5th, Solving the Communion Enigma, the next step in our incredible journey toward a higher level of human experience that will unfold just as these times become darker and darker. There will be a light shining in the middle of all of this darkness. It will not be the great passive, indifferent mass of people all around you. It will be you, those who are not passive, those who stand up, who care, and who understand the true potential of the human being. So come with me and Linda right now on a journey that you will never forget, that certainly neither of us will ever forget. This is Whitley Strieber, and this is Dreamland. You have reached the edge of the world, and this week on Dreamland, Linda Moulton Howe is back with us again to talk about an incredible UFO incident in Kitchener, Ontario, and how it relates to an equally extraordinary incident in 2008 in Stephensville, Texas. The Stephensville incident resulted in jets from nearby Carswell Air Force Base chasing a UFO, which was reported by local people, was denied by the Air Force, but then later MUFON, in an FOIA request, got radar tracks from the Federal Aviation Agency that proved without question that exactly what those honest people in that town said they saw was true. They saw Air Force jets tracking and chasing a UFO. It happened. That's the beginning of this report. But then Linda and I began to riff. One who is listening to this right now, it's time and past time. We need you, and you need us. But there's also a lighter side to everything, and I've got a couple of neat books out. I think they're very neat. One is an e-book. It's for Kindle. It is on the Amazon Kindle store. It's called Christmas Spirits by Whitley Strieber. It is an update of A Christmas Carol using my own take on it, set in modern times, and the ghosts of Christmas are no longer spirits. They are visitors, and I've woven in some of my own understanding and my own experiences to make this a real and very, I think, beautiful Christmas story. A lot of fun to read. So it's only $7.99 as well for your Kindle. If you'd like to take a look at a video about it, go to my YouTube channel. Let's simply search Whitley Strieber on YouTube.com, and you can look at that video, and you can also look at a video about our new teen thriller, Melody Burning. We began to talk about a lot of things that we know, and suddenly she opened up about something so incredible that I'm still kind of reeling, thinking about it, about the relationship between these events and an ancient language, and a man who was studying this for the government for 33 years, who told her some secrets about who we really are and who they really are that you're going to hear today. It's really remarkable stuff. The two of us, Linda and I, now have been working together for many, many years, and there's a level of trust that's built up between us, and you're getting the benefit of it today. This is possibly it's the most extraordinary Dreamland I've ever done. Certainly the most extraordinary one in many a year. So I'm very proud to present it. And now in the next breath, those of you who aren't subscribers, which is pushing 98% of every In 2008, there were some remarkable events in and around Stephensville, Texas, which Linda Moulton Howe reported on both on earthfiles.com and on Dreamland. And subscribers can listen to her report on Dreamland by simply searching for it in the subscriber section. This event was eventually investigated by MUFON, and using a Freedom of Information Act request, they obtained radar tracks showing that U.S. Air Force fighters had indeed tracked UFOs in the area of Stephensville, just as local residents reported. Now it's 2011, and lo and behold, something strikingly similar is happening in Ontario, and Linda has a remarkable report for us today covering what exactly is going on there. Of course, Linda's website is earthfiles.com,